Well, for those of you who follow me on Facebook, you know that for the month of December, I've been busy photographing and writing the copy for the 2020 version of Bic Graphics Antiques Firearms calendar. And you may recall that I started this project last year, and last year I did the 2019 calendar, which is the lead time on these. So I get the proof copy of the 2019 calendar, and these are the pictures that are going to be in it. And I should actually have a couple of hundred of these calendars available probably by early summer. I'll give you some more information, but anybody who wants to buy one, I'll have a way for you to buy them from me, because ordinarily these calendars are not available to the general public. It's not the sort of calendar that you go to buy at Barnes & Noble. Let's say it's more the kind of calendar that your bank would give you each year just for being a client of theirs. So this is what the 2019 pictures look like. And let's just take you through the 2020 calendar, which is the one that I've been working on this past December. Well, I don't really know what order these guns are going to appear in the 2020 calendar. And I don't even really know what pictures they're going to select out of all the pictures I send them for each gun. But I'll just take you through the 12 guns that I did for this year's calendar. The first one is Smith & Wesson's double-action Frontier revolver. And in the late 1870s, Smith & Wesson turned away from the foreign military markets, mostly the Russian contracts, to concentrate on the American domestic market. And in 1881, they unveiled their first double-action revolver, which was dubbed the .44 caliber DA First Model. And this is a gun that essentially took Smith & Wesson's very successful top-break single-action design, basically the new model number 3 design, and migrated it to a double-action platform. Those first guns were all made in .44 Russian cartridge, and this round was considered a very accurate target round, and it was a pretty decent self-defense round. But a lot of Westerners particularly wanted revolvers chambered for the harder-hitting .44-40 cartridge, which would allow them to use the revolver along with their Winchester rifles. And Smith & Wesson responded by lengthening the cylinder and frame of the DA First Model revolver and chambering it for .44-40, and they named that the double-action Frontier revolver. Smith & Wesson made over 15,000 double-action Frontiers chambered in .44-40, and they also made 300 of them chambered in .38-40. These were considered superior to the Colt double-action revolvers because opening the action simultaneously ejected all the spent cartridges, and that allowed for faster reloads. The .44-40 double-action Frontier revolver pictured here was manufactured in 1883. This is the Savage Model 1907 pocket automatic pistol. And when most people think of Savage, the Savage Arms Company today, they think of them as a rifle manufacturer. But in the early days of the 20th century, Savage was second only to Colt as a manufacturer of semi-automatic handguns. And the company's founder, Arthur W. Savage, decided to enter the handgun market in response to the United States government announcing its intention to adopt a semi-automatic pistol for military use. And Savage really believed that his company could win that contract and would make a killing off of the lucrative government arms contracts. So he developed a large .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol, and he entered it into the government trials of 1907. And of the 20 different pistol designs submitted in 1907, only Savage's gun and Colt's gun were still in contention after 4 years of testing. In the final 6,000 round test, the Colt finished on top. So Savage was basically closed out of the military market at that point. And they decided not to market that large .45 ACP semi-automatic pistol because they didn't think there was a really big civilian market for those guns. But they knew there was a big civilian market for pocket guns, so they had designed a scaled-down version of the exact same pistol chambered in 32 ACP and 380. And that was a Savage Model 1907 pocket automatic. And it's a very neat gun. It's got some firsts. It's the first striker fired semi-automatic pistol. It looks like it has a hammer on it, but it doesn't. That's just a cocking lever for the striker. It also was the first double column staggered box magazine, so it would hold 10 rounds. And in fact, their advertising slogan was 10 shots quick. And this gun was an incredibly good seller despite its small caliber. The pocket auto was used as a backup by a lot of really knowledgeable gunfighters. In fact, one of my heroes, the Western lawman Jeff Milton, who's been called the first Border Patrol agent, used a Savage 1907 in his last gunfight in 1917. He was 56 years old, and he used the Savage to wound and arrest bank robber and murderer Frank Koch outside of Tombstone, Arizona. So these guns have a very rich history. Savage ultimately manufactured over 200,000 of the 1907 pocket autos during a 19-year production run. And the picture that you see here pictured was manufactured in 1910. This is the Winchester Model 1886 rifle. And believe me, this rifle represented the best $50,000 that Winchester ever spent. That's the price that T.G. Bennett, the executive vice president of Winchester, paid John Moses Browning for his prototype of this rifle. Between 1886 and 1935, Winchester manufactured almost 160,000 of these guns. So essentially, Bennett got the design for about 31 cents a rifle, which is a pretty good deal. And just as important was the relationship that Winchester developed with Browning. This was the second design that Winchester had bought from Browning. And they went on to buy just about everything he made for the next 20 years. Now, the 1886 rifle really revolutionized the Winchester lever-action line. Browning did away with the weak toggle link action, and he came up with an action that locked up as tight as a bank vault. I mean, this gun will handle pretty much any powerful modern cartridge made today. It's an incredibly strong design. And because it had an angled lifter, they could make this gun handle large cartridges, but in a much smaller package than the old toggle link actions. So it was a stronger, lighter gun than the 1876, the big gun they had that came before this. This was so strong that Winchester eventually chambered it in 10 cartridges that ranged in size from the 33 Winchester centerfire cartridge up to the massive 50 110 round that was used in the Sharps rifle. The 1886 rifle pictured is chambered in the 4570 government cartridge, and it was manufactured in 1898. This is the Smith & Wesson Model 1.5. The Model 1 was a 22 rimfire chambered gun, and the Model 1.5 was chambered in the somewhat larger and somewhat more powerful 32 rimfire cartridge. This gun really was a groundbreaking design, the number 1 and the 1.5. In order to produce these, Smith & Wesson got control of the Rollin White patent on bored-through revolver cylinders, and that gave them essentially a monopoly on cartridge-firing revolvers for the next 15 years. And it's a shame they did not do more with it during that period. But these guns were quite popular, and though they were not approved by the Army as an official military gun, a lot of officers bought them on private purchase to carry with them because they were very convenient. Obviously, the brass cartridges didn't fall apart in your pocket. They were waterproof, and it really launched the entire cartridge era. Now, this gun pictured, this Model 1.5, was manufactured in 1870. The rifle pictured here is a fine British sporting rifle that was sold by the firm of R.B. Rada, which had manufacturing facilities in Birmingham in the United Kingdom and had showrooms in London and Calcutta, India. The rifle, which was made in 1867, has a Snyder patent breech block and is chambered for the British Army's 5.77 Snyder cartridge. This massive cartridge was a favorite for hunters in Africa and India because it had just phenomenal stopping power on thin-skinned, dangerous game like tigers or lions. This rifle has features that we expect to find in 19th century British sporting rifles. The stock design is just perfect for shooting fast and thick cover. The lock plate and breech block are silver plated, and the walnut stock is hand checkered, and it terminates in an ebony fore-end tip. Overall, this is just an outstanding rifle, and I can tell you, it's a joy to shoot. In 1865, Remington developed the new model police revolver as a scaled-down version of its successful .36 caliber belt revolvers. It was designed to compete directly with Colt's Model 1862 Police and the Pocket Navy model revolvers. Now, early in the 19th century, most metropolitan policemen were unarmed constables, but as population surged in eastern cities in the mid-century, criminal gangs became a new law enforcement problem, and unarmed police were no longer able to effectively deal with the new criminal element. Baltimore was the first large city to arm its police force using Colt's .31 caliber 1849 pocket model revolver, and most police forces in the country followed suit. But by the 1860s, police departments were looking for a more effective chambering than the .31 caliber. They wanted a gun that would still be compact in size, but that would hit harder. Colt and Remington both developed revolvers to meet that need in .36 caliber. But Remington gained a competitive advantage over the Colt in 1868 when they developed a new cylinder design that allowed their revolvers to fire self-contained metallic cartridge ammunition without impinging on the Rollin White patent that had given Smith & Wesson a monopoly on cartridge-firing revolvers. Remington did this by using a two-piece cylinder with a removable backplate that held the cartridges in place. Remington's cartridge conversion was very popular with police and express agents, as well as with civilian shooters. Remington produced 18,000 new model police revolvers before the Rollin White patent expired in 1873. The new model police revolver pictured here was manufactured in 1873. By 1890, Winchester was looking for a replacement for its Model 1873 lever-action rifles. The pistol caliber shooting Model 1873 was still a popular seller, but modern improvements in metallurgy and engineering meant that newly designed rifles capable of shooting those same cartridges could be made that were lighter, more compact, and stronger than the Model 1873. Winchester's competitor, Marlin Firearms, was already moving in that direction, and Winchester didn't intend to be left behind. T.G. Bennett, Winchester's executive vice president, tasked firearms genius John Moses Browning with designing a successor to the venerable 1873. To spur him along, Bennett said Winchester would pay $10,000 for a prototype if it was delivered in 3 months, or $15,000 if Browning could produce it in 2 months. Browning replied, "Make it $20,000 and you'll have it in 30 days." And a month later, Browning delivered the prototype for the rifle that would become the most recognized lever-action rifle in history, the Model 1892. It's a scaled-down version of the Model 1886 high-powered rifle that was made to shoot pistol caliber cartridges like .4440, .3840, and .3220. The Model 92 rose to iconic status because of its easy availability, which made it the go-to lever-action rifle for Hollywood Western films and television shows, from the earliest days of film until the 1970s, when Italian replicas finally became widely available. Many experts consider the Model 1892 to be Winchester's smoothest lever-action rifle. The Winchester pictured here is chambered in .3220 and it was made in 1907. And it's one of the over 1 million Model 1892s that Winchester made between 1892 and 1941. This is Remington's new model number 4 revolver. And, lots of times when we think of 19th century revolvers, we think of the big Colt belt pistols, like the single action army. But the fact is that small concealable handguns have been in high demand throughout the 19th century, just like they are now. And in the 1870s and 1880s, all of the major gun manufacturers were producing guns that looked very much like this. And this gun, the model number 4 by Remington, was debuted in 1877. It's a small single-action revolver with a 2-inch barrel. And basically it's about the same size as Remington's double-barrel Derringer, except it's a little bit wider because it has a cylinder on it. And it's chambered for the same cartridge, the 41 rimfire cartridge. This is the final evolution of the Remington produced Smoot's patent new model revolvers that began with the new model number 1 in 1875. Remington produced over 23,000 of these new model number 4s during an 11-year production run. Most of them were chambered in 38 rimfire, but about 20% were chambered in 41 rimfire caliber, same as a double Derringer. The number 4 pictured is chambered in 41 rimfire and was produced in 1883. The 1860 Spencer carbine was the first magazine-fed repeating rifle or carbine to be adopted by the United States Army. After the Battle of Gettysburg, the rifle's inventor secured an appointment with President Lincoln that led to an impromptu firing session with the new rifle on the White House lawn. After he personally fired the Spencer rifle, President Lincoln was so impressed that he pushed for its rapid adoption by the armed forces. The Spencer pictured is a Model 1865. The unique feature of the Model 1865 Spencer is the Stabler cutoff switch, located just in front of the trigger. This device limited the travel of the rolling block action, preventing it from picking up a round from the magazine, and essentially turned it into a single-shot weapon. This was an attempt to assuage the single-shot proponents on the Ordnance Board. After the war, the Spencer carbine continued to do combat service in the West with cavalry units until it was replaced by the 1873 trapdoor Springfield. But most cavalry commanders considered the Spencer to be a superior arm, but they were unable to convince the Army to retain it. This is a Merwin Hulbert open-top pocket Army revolver. And all of the bird's head grip models were called pocket Army revolvers, regardless of how long the barrels were. So that's just the way it is. Merwin Hulbert revolvers have often been called the best engineered handguns of the 19th century. And I would say that is true. I mean, the tolerances are so tight on this gun that sometimes it forms a vacuum when you're pulling the parts off. It's an incredibly well-made gun. One of the neat features of the Merwin Hulbert is the automatic ejecting system. So even though it loads from a loading gate, one shell at a time, just like most revolvers at the time loaded, it ejects simultaneously by pulling the barrel out. This operation is pretty fast. You put it on half cock, push a lever with your thumb, twist the barrel sideways, and then just pull it straight out. And only the empty cartridges fall out. The cartridges that still have bullets in them are held secure by a rim in the recoil shield, and the bullets are still resting in the cylinders. So that lets you get rid of your empties and keep your good ones, and just reload the ones you had to. It was quite popular. These guns, Merwin Hulbert guns in general, were favored by a lot of smart gunfighters. Jesse James, Pat Garrett, Bass Reeves, Bob Dalton, and Pearl Hart, just to name a few, carried Merwin Hulberts. And quite a few major police departments adopted the Merwin-Hulbert revolver in the 1880s. The 44 caliber early model Merwin-Hulbert open top that you see pictured here was manufactured in 1881. Over its 31-year service life, the trapdoor Springfield underwent some significant changes. The last major variation was the model 1884, which you see pictured here. This was built in rifle, carbine, and cadet rifle versions. The 1884 trapdoor was chambered in the 4570 government cartridge. And the major difference between the 1884 and the previous versions of the trapdoor Springfield was its rear sight. This sight, designed by Lieutenant Colonel Adelbert R. Buffington of the Ordnance Department, was very unusual for a military sight. Most military sights of the era were only adjustable for elevation, but the Buffington rear sight was adjustable for both elevation and for windage. It also had a variety of apertures for sighting at ranges out to 1,400 yards. The model 1884 carbine pictured here was manufactured in 1888. The last calendar gun we're going to look at is the Colt New Service Revolver. This was debuted in 1898, and it set the standard for Colt double-action revolver design for the next 75 years. Now, this is a massive gun. In fact, it was the largest double-action revolver in the world until Colt produced the .44 Magnum chambered Anaconda revolver in 1990. The New Service revolver had a simplified mechanism from earlier Colt double actions, so it improved the trigger pull and the accuracy of the gun. Because of its large frame size, it could be chambered for all the man-stopping calibers used in Colt's big single-action Army revolvers. And in 1909, the Army had adopted the New Service, chambered in .45 Colt, to replace its .38 Colt chambered revolvers that had performed so poorly during the Philippine insurrection. The New Service was only supposed to be a stopgap until the Army selected a .45 ACP chambered semi-automatic pistol, which they did in 1911. However, when the United States entered World War I in 1917, there simply weren't enough 1911 semi-auto pistols to outfit the Expeditionary Force. So the Army ordered 150,000 Colt New Service revolvers, chambered in .45 ACP, the same as the semi-auto pistol. Because these were rimless cartridges, they were loaded into the cylinders using a pair of semi-moon clips that held 3 rounds each. Those were designated the Model 1917, but in all other respects they are simply New Service revolvers. Colt built over 350,000 New Service revolvers over a 46-year production run. The revolver pictured here is a beautifully restored Model 1917 that was built early in the production run in 1917.